Hello dear IELTS candidates, it's me, the hero teacher, and in today's video we are going to take a look at one of the most prominent IELTS reading questions we call not completion. Well, not completion questions basically appear in the passage 1 of the reading test. We can easily regard these questions as one of the easiest question types in the entire reading section. And if you apply the strategies that I am going to demonstrate in this video, I'm sure that you'll find all the answers correctly. Now, without further ado, let's get started. Before we move on to the questions, if you think these videos are useful for those who prepare for the IELTS test, you can subscribe to this channel because that motivates me to shoot more videos. Thank you very much, and let's begin the questions. All right, now let's get started. As you can see on the screen, I've got 2 pages open, one about the passage that we're going to read, and the other one is the questions that are related to this passage. It's been taken from Cambridge Practice Test book number 17, which is an official test book for the IELTS preparation. Well, not completion questions can be regarded, as I told you in the beginning of the video, the easiest or one of the easiest questions because it's simple to follow and it's simple to find the answers from. Yet, you need to be very careful in order not to make a mistake because that can cost you a lot by the end of the test. Before we actually start doing any questions or finding any answers for the questions, we need to be sure about the instruction of the questions, like given for the questions. And we know that we can write only one word as an answer. Sometimes it can be one word and a number. Sometimes it can be 2 words, or sometimes it can be like 2 words and or a number. You need to pay attention to these instructions because finding answers will also depend on the number of words or numbers that can be used in these questions. After that, once we are sure that, okay, we understand the instruction clearly, we move on to the questions. And every not completion set of questions has got its heading or title. And this title helps us locate these questions easily in the passage. However, here is a very important tip that I'd like to share with you, and that is the number of questions. Look, this not completion is question 1 to 6, which means it's the first set of the passage, it's the first set of questions related to that passage, and I assume, because it is the passage number 1, I assume that these questions, the answers to these questions, will be in the first parts of the passage, which means if I read a few paragraphs from the beginning of the passage, that'll be enough to find all the answers. Unlike passage 2 and 3, questions in passage 1, especially not completion questions, usually come from the particular part of the passage. Like if it is first 6 questions, then first 3, 4, maybe 5 paragraphs will be ready. Will be enough to read and answer the questions. Okay, now that I know this, I immediately go to question number 1 to analyze immediately. And I see that it says the blah 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 of London increased rapidly between 1800 and 1850. So, one more tip for you guys is that not completion questions in the IELTS reading test usually has noun answers. So I need to find out a noun to complete it. And I know that it's easy to find, but I need to understand. Okay, so it has to be related to London. It increased rapidly. So I know what is increase. What is increase? Increase is like going up, right? So the opposite meaning would be decrease, but increase is going up. Rapidly means fast. And here is the period. It's important to analyze the question before you look for the answer in the passage. That prevents confusion from happening, and that also helps you basically find the correct answer immediately. So I'm looking for something belonging to London increasing fast between the given years. Once the question is clear, you can start reading the passage. And here we are. In the first half of the 1800s, London's population grew at an astonishing rate and the central area became increasingly congested. Wow, I think I already read something related to London, so I saw it, and population. So population looks like that is the answer, but I need to be sure that it matches with this increased rapidly. And I see that instead of increase, it says grew. Well, I agree with that. And also, instead of rapidly, it says at an astonishing rate, which already means rapidly, which means fast. An astonishing rate is fast. And that's why I can take my answer as population, and I can easily place it here. So I'll just do this so that we can recognize it easily. So the answer is population. And look what happened. I understood my question easily, and from the first sentence I found the answer. Well, I would say the first answer in the first sentence is a little unlikely in IELTS passages, but well, it happened, and you always need to be careful about such surprises, I may say. Now, then we are moving on. So some candidates think the lines or the parts of the notes that don't have any questions inside do not matter. That is a big mistake, because although there aren't any questions in these lines, they help us to stay on track of the passage. Which means as I continue reading the passage, when I see these lines, I see that, okay, I am getting closer to my second answer. Now let's keep reading. In addition, the expansion of the overground railway network resulted in more and more passengers arriving in the capital. Okay. However, in 1846, a royal commission decided that the railway should not be allowed to enter the city, the capital's historic and business center. Okay. The result was that the overground railway stations formed a ring around the city. The area within consisted of poorly built, overcrowded slums, and the streets were full of horse-drawn traffic. The streets were full of horse-drawn vehicles and traffic. Okay, I already have found my second line, which means, okay, I'm on the right track. Then we have got the proposed solution. Charles Pearson, a solicitor, suggested building an underground railway. Okay, now I move on immediately and start my second paragraph. Vocal advocates for a solution to London's traffic problems was Charles Pearson. Okay, I already found this guy, and it is here, which means I am getting closer to my second answer. And now that I know I am closer to my second answer, I need to read this part to see what the question is about, and I need to be wary of it in the passage. Building the railway would make it possible. So building the railway would make it possible to move people, all right, to better housing. Okay, better housing in the blah, blah, blah. So it's probably better housing in an area. If, let's say, based on Pearson's suggestion, the railway is built, it'll be easy or possible to move people to better housing in a given area. Okay, let's see. Now, it is where we were left in the passage, and I'd like you to notice how we work with the passage and the questions at the same time to avoid confusion. Because if you try to read and understand all the questions in one go and then move on to the passage, it'll confuse you. But in this way, you go step by step, and that's much easier. So, he saw both social and economic advantages in building an underground railway that would link the overground railway stations together and clear London slums at the same time. His ideas, so I'm not reading anything about being possible or possibility of moving people to a better housing in somewhere. That's why I keep reading. His idea was to relocate poor workers. Relocate, okay, something interesting. Who lived in the inner city slums, okay, to newly constructed suburbs. And provide cheap rail travel for them to get work. Okay, this sentence has already attracted my attention. So his suggestion, his idea was to relocate poor workers. It's about possible to move people. Well, you can ask, but poor workers are not people. No, they are people. Paraphrasing a phrase or let's say, I wouldn't call it a sentence, but a clause or not even a clause, like a word combination can be different in IELTS passages. That's why you need to use your logic just to match them, okay? Sometimes a little, again, confusing, but you should be very sharp to understand it. So relocate the poor workers who lived in inner city slums to newly constructed suburbs. So newly constructed can mean better housing, and where? Suburbs. So my answer, better housing in the suburbs, is going to be suburbs, which is this. Now let me do this. So yes. Now we have found our second answer, which is suburbs and provide cheap blah 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 to work. Well done to you and to me. So we have already found two answers. Now we are moving to question number 3 because that's the next line. A number of blah 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 agreed with Pearson's idea. So here Pearson and agree are our keywords or keywords, like the words that help us locate the idea or the sentence in which the question is hidden easily in the passage. Now, Pearson's ideas gained support amongst some businessmen, and in 1851 he submitted a plan to Parliament. Well, we are looking for people or someone or something agreed with Pearson's idea. Probably it's people, right? And when I read it from this part, I see that gained support, which means like, who do we support? The people that we agree with, right? So that's why the answer here will be businessmen. Okay, and let me paste it here and do this. Perfect. Well, you may still ask a question that why the gap between first and second question was so large, but the gap between second and third question was so little. It's so normal, it's very normal, because this is how IELTS test designers try to trick you. There isn't a certain, let's say, amount of gap or a certain way of gapping between the questions so that you can memorize it. It's impossible to kind of memorize the gaps. Some questions can be paragraphs apart, some questions can be just sentences apart. For example, this one, here is my question 2 and here is my question 3. That's why we go part by part and we go with the passage and questions at the same time. Now, we are going to read question number 4. The company initially had problems getting the blah 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 needed for the project. So, initially means at the beginning, problems, it means they struggle with something, getting what needed for the project. So they wanted something, but they couldn't get it. That's what we need for this answer. And we continue reading. It was rejected, but coincided with a proposal from another group for an underground connecting line, which Parliament passed. The two groups merged and established the Metropolitan Railway Company in August 1854. The company's plan was to construct an underground railway line from the Great Western Railways station at Paddington to the edge of the city at Farringdon Street, a distance of almost 5 kilometers. Again, I keep reading because I haven't read anything what company at the beginning or initially needed but couldn't get. The organization had difficulty in raising the funding for such a radical and expensive scheme, not least because of the critical articles printed by the press. Well, I'm looking for what they needed at the beginning, but they couldn't have it. And raising the funding. So funding is the answer that I can easily place it here. So you see, when you understand the question and when you read the passage calmly and try to find the answers logically, it works perfectly well. And I found the answer, which is great. Negative articles, now I am moving to question number 5. Negative articles about the project appeared in the blah blah blah. So, let's move on. Radical and expensive scheme, not least because of the critical articles printed by the press. Oh la la. You see, immediately after question number 4, I found the answer for question number 5, which is the press. Why? Because I am looking for negative articles. So articles can be where? Obviously in a newspaper or on a newspaper website or in a press, right? About a project appeared somewhere, and when I read it, not least because of the critical. So what is a critical article? A critical article is an article that kind of criticizes something. And we know that it is negative. That's why they were printed in the press, and the press is my answer. Oops, let's go for it. Oops, yep, and there we go. And finally, we are moving to the construction phase. But again, look what happens in the construction phase. We have 2 lines that do not contain any questions. We cannot and must not ignore these lines as they help us stay on track. We are going to start reading from here because until the end we have no information about construction. First, the chosen route did not require many buildings to be pulled down. Let's see if we can find it. Aware that new line would finally enable them to run trains into the heart of the city, invested almost £250,000 in the scheme. Eventually, over a 5-year period, 1 million was raised. The chosen route ran beneath existing main roads to minimize the expense of demolishing buildings. Alright. So we already found it. Then let's go to the next one. The cut and cover method was used to construct the tunnels. Let's try to find it. Originally scheduled to be completed in 21 months, the construction of the underground line took 3 years. It was built just below street level using a technique known as cut and cover. Great, I am on the right track. I already have found this one. Now it is time for question number 6. With the completion of the brick arch, the tunnel was covered with something. Now, the completion of brick arch and the tunnel was covered with something. I need to find out whatever that tunnel was covered with. And that's why I keep reading. A trench about 10 meters wide and 6 meters deep was dug, and the sides temporarily held up with timber beams. Okay, brick walls. Sorry, sometimes I lose my reading. Brick walls were then constructed, and finally a brick arch. Okay, I found what I wanted to find was added to create a tunnel. Then a 2-meter deep layer of soil was laid on top of tunnel and road above rebuilt. So tunnel was covered with and soil layer was laid on top of the tunnel, which basically mean the same thing. That's why my last answer is soil. And with that, my dears, I found the last answer of the note-completion questions. Now, you can see that we only had to read 1, 2, 3, 4 paragraphs to answer 6 questions, and all of these 4 paragraphs were the first 4 paragraphs. So we didn't read anything from the middle, and we didn't read anything from the end of the passage. That's why always make sure that you know this, that if it is first questions, they have to be in the first part of the passage, especially in passage 1. And as you read the notes, make sure that you understand these notes, you understand even the lines that do not contain any questions, because they help you to read and understand the passage at the same time. Well, that's it, my dears. We already have learned how to deal with these note completion questions easily. You just need to follow the passage and also the questions. Kind of read the story and understand it and answer the questions accordingly. As you know, understanding the instruction, which is one word only or two words only and something similar, you know what kind of answers you are going to look for. On top of that, remember, note completion questions in the IELTS reading test mostly, if not all the time, require nouns. I also would like you to share your own way of dealing with these questions in the comment section below so that other candidates can learn from you too. Thank you very much and see you in the next lesson. Bye-bye.